Did everyone lose sound?
Yes, there's no sound.
Yes.
I muted everybody as they come in.
Okay.
All right. Now I can say good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jack Newton, and I am the programs chair for, co-chair for ULI Cleveland. My way I pay the bills is I'm a project manager at GVX Group here in Cleveland as well. We specialize in historic tax credits, preservation, and everything in between. But thank you for joining us today to discuss Cleveland 2030 housing plan. As you know, ULI as an organization, for those that are familiar, is excited to play the role of hosting this. But for those that are unfamiliar with the Urban Land Institute, just want to give a quick overview as to what we do. We are an organization of practicing land use professionals and community leaders, founded to share information and experience, showcase new projects, and examine trends and innovation in the entire region of Northeast Ohio. So that involves events like today, where we partnered with a group working on the housing plan for the city of Cleveland. I wanted to also go ahead and thank our sponsors for the 2021 year. Melanie is pulling that list up right now. As a reminder, sponsorship is critical to keeping the Urban Land Institute's Cleveland chapter functioning. So thank you to all those that have contributed in 2021, and we are opening up 2022 sponsorship opportunities. So if that is something you are interested in, we're always happy to entertain any questions or entertain some checks. So definitely think about that as we're going into the new budgeting year. That being said, I do want to take a moment to continue the momentum of community conversations like this to let you know about an event that is coming up on November 10th, Building the 21st Century City. It is the second part of a wonderful event that we hosted. Just want to reiterate that it is part of Cleveland's mission, or ULI Cleveland's mission, representing groups that are collaborating within the city and community partners. The city of Cleveland and ULI Cleveland presented a zoning symposium, 21st Century Cities, which has resulted in a pilot project to rewrite the 100-year-old zoning code of Cleveland. The pilot is being discussed at Cleveland City Council within a couple of weeks. And some of those attending today are also attending the Building 21st Century City Symposium presented by the city and ULI Cleveland. That was back in March. And the goal of this project is to identify specific programs or policies for consideration by the city and its community partners in order to help advance the city and the region as a dynamic 21st century city with a focus on equity and inclusion. I just want to let everyone know once again that phase 2 of the 21st Century City project will be presented on November 10th. That is available on our website if you're interested in learning more. And I know Melanie will drop a link in the chat for those that do want to do a little extra reading on the side. But with that being said, I just really wanted to go ahead and hand the mic to Kirby Date, who will serve as our moderator this afternoon, and who will do a much better job introducing herself than I will. So that being said, Kirby, kick us off.
Thank you, Jack. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. As many of you know, the ULI is partnering with a team that has been working with the city of Cleveland over the last year plus to develop a 10-year housing plan for the city. Many folks from the development and banking and real estate communities have been involved in the conversation, along with residents and housing agencies and social service groups. So it's been very well discussed at the community and stakeholder level over the past year. So today we have a handful of folks who've been engaged with the project to present the basic story of the project and its recommendations. and then have a discussion, which we hope you will all participate in, about the implications of this and how we can carry it forward into the coming decade. 10 years, it's a 10-year plan for the city of Cleveland. Full disclosure, I am Kirby Date. I am principal of KM Date Community Planning. Some of you may know me as a former member of the Cleveland State Community Development Team, professional team working there at Levin College. I also was a member of the consulting team for this project, working under Penn Praxis as a local engagement planner. So I have some knowledge of the project as well. What we're going to do today, Vince Reyna from University of Pennsylvania, who was the project team leader, will present about a 20-minute presentation on the project itself. And then we have a group of 3 panelists who were engaged as stakeholders in the project to respond to some structured questions. And then we're going to open it up to the audience. So you might want to think about questions that you would like to pose. So Vince is associate professor in the Department of City and Regional Planning at the University of Pennsylvania. His research focuses on urban economics, low-income housing policy, household mobility, neighborhood change, and community and economic development. And as I mentioned, he was the leader of the Penn Praxis team, which developed the Cleveland 10-year housing plan, along with 3 local partners, myself, Tracy Nichols with PMC, and Kayla Geschke with Neighborhood Connections. So with that, Vince, I'll just turn it over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm just gonna get the presentation up in full screen mode. Can everyone see that okay? Kirby, can you give me a thumbs up?
Yes.
Just
Yes.
Cool. Awesome.
Good.
Sweet.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for having us here today. I'm really excited to present what's been a long and wonderful project that has engaged many of you along the way, Cleveland 2030, a housing equity plan. I'm going to be going very quickly through a lot of stuff, probably not able to give full explanation of absolutely everything here, but I put in the chat already a link to the website where you can actually see the presentation here today. You can see a draft of the plan. You could go to all the community meetings that we've hosted. You could look at the comments people provided. You can look at all the appendices, everything's there. So you could spend your whole day appreciating all that went into this plan. As Kirby said, this is our team, a team from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Rodriguez and I are here on the call today. Claudia Aiken, who's the director of the Housing Initiative at Penn, we're also kind of leading from the University of Pennsylvania side. And we worked very closely with our local team, Kirby, who just chatted, Kayla Geschke at Neighborhood Connections, and Tracy Nichols at PMC, all of whom were wonderful partners throughout this whole process. I should say before we go, this whole planning process involved a really robust engagement strategy that Dr. Rodriguez can speak to later should anyone have questions on it. But to give you a sense of it, we interviewed over 180 stakeholders, surveyed 2,000 residents, surveyed 80 developers. We had 8 neighborhood ambassadors conduct 7 focus groups with hard to reach communities. We held 2 public meetings with 400 registrants. We collected additional feedback via the plan website itself. We conducted 3 advisory committee meetings. Some of our advisory committee members are here today. The advisory committee members actually chaired 6 stakeholder groups that really unpacked a lot of the important ideas in the, or put forth a lot of the important ideas in this plan. And they all met twice. The working group chairs and city committee each met to synthesize all the recommendations along the way. We were on bi-weekly calls with public officials throughout this whole planning process. We had a final public meeting that was on September 15th, and we actually held a subsequent one at the end of September as well. And we have this planned meeting today. We met with the social service agencies, CDCs and taxing entities, and I know the city is going to be meeting with city council as well to help discuss this plan going forward. So as you can see, what we're presenting here today is not something we as a team put together. It was very much a collective effort. And what we were doing was really facilitating a process where a lot of information was gathered and analyzed and shared. And we're excited to present it to you today in this document. So in conjunction with what I just highlighted there was really a robust kind of research component to this that involved a lot of analysis of that qualitative data around those focus groups and interviews, as well as the survey data in and of itself to really complement a lot of the quantitative analysis that we were doing about what's going on with the housing market, what we're seeing, what data is telling us, to really paint this really robust, comprehensive story about what's going on in Cleveland. Within this, we also did an analysis of existing programs and gaps within these programs themselves. So separate and apart from research on markets and all the outreach we did and engagement about what the needs are and what recommendations are, we really took stock of what's going on within the city itself and what seems to be working, what seems to not be working. And so the way that's formalized is in a whole host of appendices to the plan itself that you can really dive into and see. You could see all the community feedback we received, all the comments. You can see summaries of the survey results, all of our data analysis, all of our market analysis work. So I do hope that you check that out. So where did we land? So we landed with this vision, right? The Housing Equity Plan is an action plan with a broad set of programs, policies, and investments that over the next decade will ensure that all Clevelanders, renters, homeowners, and those who are unhoused have access to safe, healthy, and affordable homes in a vibrant neighborhood. This plan will tackle the racial and geographic divides that define the Cleveland housing market. It will promote growth that lifts up individuals and communities that have excluded from housing opportunities, including the opportunity to participate in housing design and development. Oh, my slides are not advancing. You're only seeing the cover one. That's interesting. This is the great part about having a colleague on a call with you. So let me just do it maybe like this. Can you see it now? Awesome, thank you. And just so you know, so you can see the previous slides. Here's the one about the engagement strategy. Here's the one showing you pretty pictures of all our research. And here's the one with our vision. So thank you for that. I'll leave it out of presentation mode. So we're going to promote growth. The plan aims to promote growth that lifts up individuals and communities that have been excluded from housing opportunities, including the opportunity to participate in housing design and development. And this plan will support Clevelanders who want to remain in their homes while also attracting new residents to the city. So this vision was something that came out of the planning process and was actively discussed with the advisory committee members in public meetings and was felt to represent the broader goals and vision that would guide the plan over the next 10 years. So our research showed a lot of different realities within the city of Cleveland, many of which you can really dive into in our reports, but we wanted to highlight some here. And you all being on this call know many of these facts very well, although some of them might actually be new to you, right? So as you know, there's stark inequality in income and mortgage lending by race and ethnicity in the city of Cleveland. Households of color are much more likely to rent their homes. There's persistently high rates of eviction, with most of those people being evicted being single mothers of color. Rentership is increasing as both the number and in both the absolute number and in the share of households within the city of Cleveland. And households in Cleveland are shrinking and aging, meaning the household sizes are getting smaller and increasingly older. There are persistent challenges of neglect, vacancy, and abandonment. Permits for alterations, repairs are concentrated on the west side. The number of structures in good or excellent condition is actually declining. In 2018, the city spent only half of the available HUD entitlement funds that it had. The number of homes repaired through the city program is declining. The Housing Trust Fund loans for new development have also declined, and the right to counsel assists only a small share of those facing eviction. So this research highlights a whole host of challenges But within these challenges, there are also distinct opportunities. And the goal of the plan is to really see these challenges and address them and see them as opportunities for kind of reaching those visions that I highlighted already. So one of the key components of this plan is a real spotlight on equity. So one of the things we wanted to do is really show how this plan promotes housing equity. Many of the actions put forward in this plan are specifically designed to promote equity in housing outcomes, as well as equitable access to housing and resource opportunities. So I'm going to highlight some examples here, but one of the things we wanted to really do was infuse components of equity throughout the process, right? This is where investment goes. This is who's engaged in decision-making. This is who's engaged in the development process along the way. So by the end of 2021, the city plans to develop an equity framework to guide all housing programs and decisions, and that's going to be the first action step taken from the city in the pursuit of this plan. The plan seeks to support minority developers and contractors through affirmative access to financing, technical assistance, and youth mentorship. And there are some programs that really pull out that element. The plan aims to include affordable, accessible options in new development and target underserved neighborhoods for infrastructure improvements. Again, a host of programs and policies aim to promote that. The plan will protect vulnerable households from displacement by a targeted tax relief for longtime homeowners and a suite of new protections for renters. And the plan will assess progress using a housing scorecard that includes equity metrics like the number of grants and loans provided to households of color and the volume and nature of investments in traditionally underserved communities. And so with this, I'll show you the scorecard, and our hope is to really put forth the plan here, but also really make the case that this plan will only be fulfilled through accountability. And that accountability comes through the city itself reporting on what it's doing, but really you all on this call here today, keeping the city accountable to the goals that they're setting forward. So here's a main overview of the plan itself. So equity is the pillar that essentially oversees the whole plan, right? So all four of the pillars I'm going to highlight are rooted in a vision for an equitable housing market in which those who have historically been excluded and continue to be excluded from housing opportunities are prioritized for those opportunities going forward. And within these four pillars, we have kind of essentially, under this equity kind of framework, we have four pillars, right? The first is protect. So the goal here is to protect households from housing instability and displacement. The next is around preservation, to preserve existing housing as safe, livable, and affordable. The next is around production, which is produce a range of all housing types in all neighborhoods. And then finally, the goal around positioning. So positioning the city of Cleveland and its partners to achieve these goals going forward. So one of the ways of doing that is to really think about the capacity of the city. One of the things that came through in all our engagement and outreach work was that it's wonderful to have goals and plans and to set out a vision and have resources, but those resources need to make it out the door, right? And so throughout the plan, we really thought about challenges around capacity and ways to actually address those challenges around capacity, because the city can only pursue these insofar as they have the capacity to actually get dollars at the door and not only as the government itself build their capacity, but build the capacity of the field to really fulfill a lot of the promises that are being put forth here. And these promises are quite large, right? So within the protect pillar, the goal over the next 10 years would essentially be to protect over 35,000 units in the city of Cleveland. In the preserve pillar, the goal is to preserve over 41,000 housing units. And the goal beyond that is also produce an additional 23,000 housing units. And so what we offer in this plan is kind of a breakdown of showing how these numbers break out across ownership and rental type, the total unit counts by 2030, and what the income targets would be for each of these groups. As I said before, we put forth the housing scorecard. What this meant to do is essentially create a venue for annual reporting on progress towards the targets by neighborhood and race and ethnicity, really track key equity metrics, report on the status of each action, and regularly convene stakeholders and coalitions around these outcomes. Now, again, this scorecard really becomes the means for promoting accountability. And that means the city has to actually report on what they're doing, speak and engage with folks publicly about this. But we're also hoping, again, everyone here on the call today is the conduit for really keeping the city accountable to meeting these goals and identifying when and where they have not met these goals. So for resourcing the plan, this plan in many ways pushes the city well beyond what it's done in the past. And what it essentially translates to is a $2.2 billion total investment commitment over the next 10 years. That's a significant growth in the commitment in the past, both with respects to dollars and unit counts. And so what we do is we try to break out what that actually means for what's being done already and what the advancement is going to be going forward. Fortunately, we're at a moment where there are tremendous federal resources being put towards housing. And what this does is represents a really distinct opportunity for the city of Cleveland with these federal funds to really push forward a lot of these exciting ideas and initiatives and have the funding in place already to actually hit the ground running with many of these ideas. What we've done in the plan is we've really broken things out to highlight kind of short-term recommendations, medium-term recommendations, and long-term recommendations, knowing not everything can be done on day one, but a lot of things you can set the groundwork from that for day one and know that these programs might not actually come to fruition until several years from now or further down the road. And so with this too, we broke down each theme: protect, preserve, produce, in these and position within these kind of shorter term and longer term goals. And so I can't go into absolutely every recommendation within the plan. There's a whole host of them, and I promise as many are in the front of the plan, there's even more in the back of the plan. One of the beauties, again, of this plan is it's meant to be a living document, right? We're establishing a vision and a set of priorities and goals here, but this is something that should be revisited consistently. Right? We did not know the COVID-19 pandemic was going to happen. And in many ways, many of the housing challenges that we're seeing right now are just amplifications of those challenges that existed before the pandemic. However, I say that here because what it highlights is that we don't know what the future holds. And so what we need is a plan that really speaks to the future, but also has a broad set of resources and information there that you can adjust this plan to actually react to future opportunities that might actually come up, right? And so we put forward ideas here, but it's not to say that things that aren't further back in the plan, the appendices, can't be pushed forward at a later point in time. So under the protect recommendations, you see some short and medium term goals. Some of the short term goals, like I said before, was developing an equity framework to guide a lot of the decision making, develop tax relief program for long-time low-income homeowners, create a shallow rent subsidy program, expand the eviction diversion program, expand the right to counsel. In the medium term in the protect area, we're looking for tenants' right legislation around source of income, pay to stay, fair chance, rental insurance programs, and to scale up alternative lending programs. In the preserve category in the short term, there's a goal to increase access to private home repair financing, so programs that really target that, programs that expand home repair education, programs that explore new strategies to preserve subsidized affordable housing, programs that curb predatory investment, and programs and policies that improve appraisal accuracy. In the medium term around the preservation pillar, there's programs that develop credit enhancement for purchase rehab loans, create emergency home repair programs, create small landlord loan programs, build contractor capacity, implement compassionate code enforcement, and expand down payment assistance and prioritize those where there's appraisal financing gaps. In the produce area, we've highlighted the need in the short term to update zoning to allow for more housing types, preserve, improve tax abatement program, streamline the permitting process, expedite permitting for priority projects, reduce complexity and the cost of the land bank transfers, and explore other cost reductions. So I'm highlighting points here that seem like just a list of things that are needed, but within the plan itself, we really discuss how this can be done, right? So that's where you need to go to the plan itself to really kind of see how these things are mechanized a bit, but also again, to really work with the city to push them to think about the real opportunities and challenges around operationalizing these ideas put forward. In the medium term, there's the goals of incentivizing development in underinvested neighborhoods, and there's a lot of programs that actually speak to that. Implement inclusionary zoning in strong markets, require accessibility in new projects, implement form-based zoning citywide, and increase developer and contractor diversity. And then finally in position, here's where long-term really kind of starts to come in. The idea here that we're really kind of building things along the way and setting the city of Cleveland up for long-term success. So in the short term, there's efforts to selectively demolish abandoned housing, create universal applications for housing programs, so really streamlining the process for people to access programs, address barriers to application completion, and issue the housing report card to promote accountability around the plan itself. And medium term, there's efforts to coordinate infrastructure and housing investments, launch effective housing resource outreach strategies, maintain a strong continuum of care, expand the housing trust fund, and get public dollars out the door, right? So the public dollars out the door is going to be a key theme throughout the plan itself. And finally, in the long term, make basic neighborhood infrastructure upgrades, integrate service delivery across providers, and really expand available non-public capital. So really kind of positioning the idea that this is a housing plan, but this is a housing plan that's situated within broader neighborhood investments and much more important needs around integrating those investments and thinking comprehensively about neighborhood investments and what that means for the future of those areas, their affordability, their accessibility, all of those kinds of things. So I threw a lot of ideas out there. We can really dive into each one of these in much more detail, but we have a wonderful Q&A now where we can actually speak to some of these from many of the practitioners who engage with us in our advisory committee throughout stakeholder meetings and have really informed and guided this process in so many wonderful ways. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Vince. A lot in a short period of time, but I'm hoping folks can think a little bit about what you presented in the recommendations. If anybody wants to look at that as we're talking, the website has the slides on it, and that is www.clevelandhousingplan.com. All right, so we are going to start our panel conversation. As we open, I want to make sure I introduce Akira Drake Rodriguez properly, because it looks like will be available to help answer questions here. She is an assistant professor at Penn in the Wiseman School of Design and also the School of Social Policy. Akira was a key team member leading the outreach and engagement part of the project. So I worked with her closely along with my other local partners. We spent weekly meetings we had. So I want to make sure she has a proper introduction. Other panel members we have with us today, Jim Poznik is Director of Acquisitions and Underwriting at the National Development Council Corporate Equity Fund. Jim is on the CHN Partners Board and also served as a working group co-facilitator for the Cleveland 10-year housing plan. Karen Paganini is President and COO of K&D Group and is also on the CHN Partners Board. She's the board chair of the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, and Karen served on the advisory committee for the 10-year housing plan and also participated in one of the working groups. And then finally, Kevin Nowak is executive director of CHN Housing Partners, and he participated in one of the working groups also of the 10-year housing plan. So we all have some background and experience with this. So what we have is a couple of structured questions. It's 12:32. I think we'll go for maybe 15 minutes and we'll divide the rest of it so we give the audience a chance to ask questions as well. Opening question for all of you. From your perspective, and you all have different sort of takes on the different aspects of the development community, for-profit development, nonprofit development, finance. So from your perspective, why is the plan important and which of the recommendations do you see as the most urgent and why? Karen, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, well, I just want to start by saying they're all completely important. But right now we have a lot of federal funds available. So I think it's really important to use them and get those out into people's hands. And I think the most important thing is that people need to know how to get to them. We need to streamline any process possible so that people know the funds are available and how to quickly implement what they need. I'm thinking that the repairing of our preserve, I guess, is really important to me because, our housing stock is in decline. We have a lot of folks out there who could really use a helping hand. We have the dollars to help them. So I think while we're structuring and we're producing and positioning ourselves for the future, we should be closing up this back end and helping folks that we can help right now today get their homes in order and prepare for the future. So we've got that piece done and we've got them in good shape and we can move on.
Great, thank you. Jim, what are your thoughts on this?
I appreciate it. Yeah, I guess a couple of things with regard to the plan and why is it important and so forth. Certainly, I think we'd all agree that stable housing is probably the most one of the most important and influential things that could affect a person. So I think it's a social issue. It's something that really underscores and is critical, I think, to a lot of different challenges we face in the city. So you got to have a plan, first of all, and I think certainly there's a lot of good information, a lot of good data that was highlighted in the study. But certainly, we need a framework. It's a long-term solution. It's a problem that didn't creep up overnight, and it's going to take a long time to fix the issues. And so, I think the idea of a plan, it's got to be big, it's got to be bold, and it has to really be alive and sort of like I think Vincent said, it's going to be changing over time. But certainly, what's most important, what's most urgent, and again, sort of from my perspective, I think that probably neighborhood infrastructure to me is it's got to be addressed immediately. And so I think that component of it is something that probably needs the most attention right away in the short run. But certainly, again, this plan needs to be a living, breathing document over time, and that it can't survive without a lot of interaction from a lot of different parties, not just the city of Cleveland. So, so I think that's where I'm coming from on this.
Thank you. And Kevin, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So appreciate being here today. I think just like any of us that are in business, right? You need a strategic plan, right? The strategic plan becomes organizing principle through which you focus your investments. This allows for us as a community to focus our investments in a more specific way. If you think about a strategic plan, oftentimes you're looking at a 3 to 5 year period. But when you think about bending the curve and on housing and housing issues, neighborhood stability issues, you need to be looking longer than that. And a 10-year term seems entirely appropriate and something that could potentially live kind of, administration on administration. We had a whole bunch of housing issues in the before times, right? Before all this pandemic. We're going to continue, we've had them during, become more aware for many of us. And then, in the after times, we'll continue to have that. We have the same problems, administration on administration within this community, right? So for us to have an organizing principles that could potentially live beyond, between and beyond a particular administration is important. In terms of recommendations, when we think about it, I think Karen started off with ARPA, and I want to start there too, right? Because we have an opportunity, to do something great with those dollars. This is a 10-year plan, but I see one of my other CHN colleagues on my big board right here, Ellen. We work with 50,000 families a year, right? But we have a sense of urgency with every unit, every family, every day, right? We need to maintain that sense of urgency over a 10-year period, right? But then also we need to address what's in front of us today, whether that be helping people with their rent, whether that be helping people with their mortgages, whether that be implementing an effective home repair program with ARPA, right? So, thinking through how we can use the ARPA dollars in the immediate, but then also in the long term to help to seed long-term funding and local solutions, because that's what we need, right? The federal government can only do so much for us. We need to be thinking about those local solutions. This could be the stimulus for that. Second is homeownership access. There's a report recently about how, Cleveland area, has become primarily a tenant-based, housing stock as opposed to homeownership based. That's something that we as a community really need to be thinking about. And this plan does a great job on trying to focus on and maintain homeownership as a priority in our region. And the third is preserving units at risk, whether those be rental units, whether it be aging housing stock that's homeowner based. Those are the three kind of key recommendations I would say need particular urgency.
Great, thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip to the partnership question, because I think you've all laid out a lot of the challenges that you see and the way the plan responds to them, which is great. So if you remember that astonishing page in the slides about the dollars of investment that are expected, that are going to be needed, and the target numbers of housing units that are going to be needed to be addressed in the coming 10 years. Obviously, this is not a project that the city of Cleveland is going to take on all by themselves, right? This is really intended to be a partnership. So I was hoping each of you could talk just a little bit about how you saw partnerships evolving in the city of Cleveland, who can do what best, and how all of this, what your vision for the future of how partnerships can work together to actually meet these goals. Because I know you all are involved in various aspects of the provision of housing in Cleveland. So I'm just going by the order on my screen here. So Karen, do you want to?
Sure. Absolutely, getting all of us involved is what it's going to take. I mean, there's not anyone on this call that I wouldn't be willing to work with at any time. We've been working a lot with Kevin's group at CHN, over the past years of the pandemic for, getting rental assistance. It's been phenomenal. They've done a wonderful job. We've helped a lot of people stay in their homes. There's other groups such as PRC, which is a little bit tougher. I mean, it's like a 15-page application. It's a little daunting for people to get help. So we need to streamline that. So I think we need to take a look at everything that we have available to us, streamline it, and all do what we're best at and do it together. I know that sounds like a kumbaya, but I really believe that. I really believe that that's what it's going to take for us to achieve this plan. So I'm excited about the plan. I think that it's laid out and very well laid out. And I know that we've talked to a lot of people, as been said in the opener. We've got a lot of ideas. It's not just the folks on this screen, with several hundreds of people. And I think that if we could just keep our nose to the grindstone and keep moving forward, we can get this done. And I'm excited to do that.
Great, thank you. Jim, do you have thoughts about
I do.
the specifics of getting this implemented?
I do. And I guess just, kind of building on what Karen was saying, first of all, this is not something that's going to work if folks are just thinking that, hey, this is a task for the city of Cleveland, or this is a, sort of a city-driven initiative. The idea is that, so we've got a lot of partners that are out there. Some know each other now, some don't. I guess a couple thoughts. One is, in order for this to work and to continue to have momentum and not just sort of be a report that sort of dies on the shelf somewhere. I think maybe there's a thought that, hey, would it be well served to have some sort of a third party sort of oversight that helps, to maintain, manage, report, provide scorecards and so forth. Something that is not necessarily a city function, but sort of a third party that keeps this moving forward. Certainly, to me, I think that's probably a critical piece. The other thing is, it's probably something that needs, and for the lack of a better term, sort of a board of directors, right? It needs folks from the community that they have a profile in the business community or whatever the case may be, to help provide oversight, direction, and to to demonstrate that there's a seriousness about making sure that this plan succeeds. A Greater Cleveland Partnership certainly has a wide variety of membership from corporate organizations and corporations and so forth. So I think somehow tying that concept to this plan, having a sort of an oversight or board of directors, if you will. I think the other thing that's probably going to be important too, in order to pull this off and to keep it relevant and alive, certainly is sort of socializing the message, right? This has got to be something that becomes something that Cleveland's known for. It's whether it has a tagline or something that I think makes it sort of top of mind, that folks understand that the city of Cleveland is serious about tackling this issue, and that the thought stays out there and stays relevant and alive. So yeah, I think those are sort of broad items, but to me, oversight, socializing the message, and getting corporate buy-in and ownership of this kind of a thing, I think is critical. Otherwise, again, it could just end up being another binder on the shelf, if you will. So I think those are important items.
When you say corporate buy-in, what are you thinking of specifically?
Well, for instance, organizations, that are certainly members of GCP, right? So Eaton corporations, the progressives, key banks and so forth, that have individuals who are assigned to be part of, like I said, possibly a board, or that are reporting back to their CEOs on how things are going relative to this.
Got it.
Plan.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin, what are your thoughts on this issue? You're one of the key partners, I think, involved, your organization.
It's in our name, for gosh sake. So, I mean, a couple of things. This is an opportunity that we shouldn't miss, right? So we can have finite thinking, scratching, at each other for resources, see this as a limited resource environment, try to grab, resources for our own organizations, right? And, or we can have infinite thinking, and we can work together in collaboration to provide a fully resourced and equitable housing market in our community. I vote for the latter. I think probably everyone on here does too. And this is an opportunity to make a statement about it, and I certainly hope we do as a community. So that's the first piece. The second piece is about partnership, right? It's about trusting each other. Oftentimes what we'll see in the community is some thinking around, well, there's people who are thinking about things and people who are implementing. The people who implement also sure know how to design the programs that they implement, because they're the ones who know what's going on, right? So I hope that, as a community, and particularly that the city of Cleveland takes a perspective of working with the private sector, whether that be for-profit or nonprofit, to have organizations fully inform and co-design programming. Not so much treating us as vendors, but as true partners in this, because that's going to be critically important. And I think the last piece of it is, when we're thinking about collaboration, it's really important to think about the downstream and the upstream, right? So, the upstream are stakeholders like your funders, right? Whether that be the city, whether that be, as Jim was saying, mentioning, some of our kind of banks in town who are really involved in affordable housing, some of our other large corporates who are, some of those have given, for example, or have lent into the Lead Safe Home Fund that we're administering. But it's also critically important to understand your downstream. Who is your customer that you'll be serving? And Karen mentioned this earlier. It's really about creating low barrier situations, right? Starting with yes. right? Oftentimes when program development, we start with no, because there's so much compliance and it's so hard, right? But in our community, we got to kind of get beyond that. Of course, remaining fully compliant with everything. Yes, Jim is my treasurer, so I want that on the record. But it's important for us to be really thinking about low barrier solutions. And that means input from those that we are serving.
Thank you so much. These are great answers. I think you all hit various aspects of this question, so that's great. Melanie, what I would like to do now is open it up for the whole panel. That includes Vince and Akira and Karen and Jim and Kevin for questions that might have come in. I don't know if folks have a question, you can raise your hand or ideally put your question in the chat and also who it's for. And Melanie, if you can help me identify those questions, that would really be great.
Absolutely. It looks like we do have one question in the chat. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. From Chris Garland, he said, thank you all for great presentation and discussion. The city of Cleveland will have a new mayor, administration, and council makeup in 2022. Can the presenters and panelists discuss their thoughts on how to ensure that this plan remains a top priority for city leadership and realizes its potential?
Great question. Very basic question. I'm gonna go in a different direction here. Maybe.
I was ready, Kirby.
Yes, I know. Well, you're in my upper left corner. What can I say? But why don't we give, shall we let the Penn folks weigh in for a second first, and then we'll follow? Okay, Vince and Akira, do you have thoughts on this? We have 10 minutes, so we're running close, but we don't have a ton of questions. So
I think I actually really like the kind of signal to have kind of a board that kind of does a lot of this oversight after, because I do think the advisory committee was like built on this partnership of people who had a stake in the housing plan and seeing it succeed. And so we have, I know that a couple of our members attended a mayoral forum, and there is like a desire to get this in front of whomever the new mayor may be. And to get that buy-in, there should be a lot of continuity for some people within the administration, considering the vast amount of outreach that we did. It was not just to kind of the development cluster and chiefs, but to workers and administrators and bureaucrats within the city of Cleveland. So we feel that we've done a substantial amount of outreach in order to get this sort of long-term continuity and buy-in across administrations. But we welcome, people here to kind of take up these, the sort of champion of this plan as well. To keep people both on the plan sort of timeline, particularly around equity and scorecards and transparency, but also just some of the nuts and bolts, particularly that infrastructure investment. I think those are all sort of key features of it.
great, thank you, Vince.
And I would just add to that, yeah, so building off that, one of the things in our final meeting with the city is they asked for a final task to help them put together an advisory committee. So we're going to be helping them do that, and that kind of aligns with what Akira just said and what Jim had said before. The idea of having that kind of non-political body that really is engaged in the practice of doing this stuff to kind of push this going forward. At the end of the day, the whether any of this gets done essentially falls on, in many ways, on all of you, right, for holding the city accountable. And so we're hoping, though, that this being out there as much as possible, that advisory committee existing, the broad engagement that we've done where all of these people have provided their feedback, and many of them have said we're tired of plans that just sit on a shelf, that all kind of culminates in kind of consistent pushes. If a report card doesn't come out in a year, I mean, that's the point where the city needs to be held accountable for that, right? Publicly and privately, right? And so we're hoping that you all serve as a venue for that.
Great, thank you, Vince. Jim, do you have thoughts on this one? I'm mixing it up.
Yeah. I think kind of going along with the rest of the folks, as far as it's on us and upon us, I guess, to make sure that it does continue on and become relevant for the next administration. So, again, I think it's on the surface, you'd say, okay, who would be against a fair and equitable housing plan? That seems kind of common sense. So, I think it's just going to be upon the incumbent upon this group and upon the stakeholders to make sure that the next administration buys into it and deems it, an important, concept and plan. So.
Great.
Mhm.
Thank you. Kevin, thoughts on above and beyond what people have already had to say?
Yeah, I think we've covered it pretty well.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Karen, do you have anything to add? Yeah.
Well, I think we're in a good spot, whether we have Mayor Kelly or Mayor Bibb. I think both of those gentlemen will be brought into this plan and will do what they can to support it in every way that they can. I think it's a real win for Cleveland either way we go. So I'm not worried. I think that it's a very well thought out plan, and once presented to either or both of them, whoever wins is going to be there right with us. I'm sure of that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Melanie, questions?
It looks like Linda has a question. Linda, did you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, so in one of the slides early on, you made a note about existing funding not being utilized or programs not being sufficiently, for lack of a better term, pushed out into the community. And I'm assuming that partly relates to capacity at the city in order to help that to happen. So do the dollar amounts estimated in your plan contemplate building capacity at the city in terms of staffing to help roll these programs out? Or are you thinking that increased capacity would come from more fully developed partnerships with entities other than the city, or both?
So Vince and Akira, do you have thoughts? You're the one in conversation, I know, with the city as those targets were developed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's kind of there's three fronts, right? One is there's definitely a need to increase internal capacity within the city to deploy these programs, right? And I know there's kind of some movement already to try to increase that capacity internally, but I think part of that really does come with the next administration. And if they see this as a priority, acknowledging that in their staffing and the way they even organize their staffing, right, can really kind of set the tone and create the person power to really push this forward. I think second, there was clear points in the plan itself where we talk about streamlining processes, right? So there's building capacity and there's using capacity better, right? And so there's clearly a lot of opportunities to integrate applications, systems in ways that really would allow things to flow better. And then beyond that, definitely, one of the clear needs here is to increase capacity within the field itself and support it, right? I think we often, assume infrastructure is there and don't invest in it. And then when we need it, we say, where is it, right? And so, there are clearly a lot of wonderful organizations doing great work, but there's also clear need to kind of increase the capacity of a lot of organizations, but also increase the diversity of the organizations. And so I think that capacity piece comes in kind of investing in existing organizations, but also investing in programs that aim to increase the contractor pool, increase the developer pool, right? And really kind of make those broader investments within the field itself.
Great. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Melanie and Jack, I don't know if we're running short on time. I know you need time to close the meeting as well.
So we actually don't have any other questions.
Okay.
We can take another question if anyone else has anything. Otherwise, we can certainly wrap up at this point.
I have one more, which came to us from Kevin, but I think it's a great question to ask, which is just middle neighborhoods. Prior to this housing getting started, there's a lot of discussion about middle neighborhoods. I know we have a program that's ongoing looking at that. So I'm wondering if you all could briefly talk to the issue of middle neighborhoods in Cleveland, how you see the plan carrying it forward, why it's important. Why don't we start with Kevin, since it was his question?
Sure. touch on that. I just want to go back really quick to the last question
Oh,
about
sure.
capacity. I think it's really important for us to evaluate where that capacity should be built and where it's existing. I don't think it's a great idea to house that at the city. I think that you see many other cities going away from that model. A private sector model can be much nimbler than a public sector model in almost every way when you're thinking about deploying housing resources. So, I think that I just want to make sure to say that, which may not be the majority opinion here, but is my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So then, on middle neighborhoods, as we're thinking through, investments in our city, I actually grew up in a middle neighborhood, and some of you know me, where I grew up over in Detroit. I grew up in a similar neighborhood to like a West Park or Bel Air is here in Cleveland, right? Middle neighborhoods are some of the really most interesting neighborhoods in our community, but they don't attract the federal dollars that otherwise are for neighborhoods that are higher poverty. But they don't have fully functioning real estate markets like some of our stronger neighborhoods do, right? So so you have a scenario in many of these middle neighborhoods where if we don't encourage additional private and public sector investment, you could see those neighborhoods decline, right? And have all the impacts that otherwise we all know happen in that decline. So the city of Cleveland, has a middle neighborhoods strategy that has been following, including trying to incentivize more lending, within those neighborhoods. It's something that as we think about our investments, most oftentimes we think about kind of the highest poverty areas, but really we need to be thinking about a strategy in this, and you see this in this plan, that thinks about all neighborhoods in the city, including those middle neighborhoods, and trying to attract that private and public investment in those spots.
Great, thank you. Karen and Jim, I'm afraid I cut off that last question. Do either of you have anything to add on the middle neighborhoods question or the capacity question that Linda raised?
No, I think, Kevin kind of outlined it pretty well. It's obviously the middle neighborhoods, you want to make sure that they don't become the problem or the further deterioration. But certainly I would agree. I mean, I think that it's kind of like the middle child, right, who tends to be ignored because you're looking at the oldest and the youngest. But I would agree that certainly has to be and should be part of the plan to keep that as a stabilizing force in the city as well.
The dollars need to go where the dollars are needed, and getting access to the funds for the middle neighborhood is equally as important as any other part of the plan.
Great, thank you. Melanie, I think we may be running to the end of time here, and Jack. So panelists, I just want to thank you all for a really great conversation. I know we just touched on the surface of things, but I think we hit on some of the big issues, and I really appreciate your time preparing for this and participating.
Absolutely. Yep.
Welcome. Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Kirby, thank you on behalf of ULI Cleveland. You're always a favorite participant of ours, and thank you for leading a great conversation with very skilled and knowledgeable panels. That being said, our Lunch and Learn has officially come to a close. Thank you everyone for your time, and hopefully you walked away a better understanding of where Cleveland's going in the next 10 years in terms of housing. As a reminder, please hop on our website. We've got some more events coming up, most notably the Building 21st Century City on November 10th. Please let us know if you have any questions. Melanie and I are reachable. Our contact information is on that website as well. But if that is all, everyone, please have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Be well, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.